That's a bad decision for him. I don't know why he accepted, because if something happens to anyone, even to me, even with Charles, he would struggle a lot. And with me, there's like he has no chances. First round, first minutes of the fight, what he's gonna do? Go for the takedowns, bro. Come on.
So, as you just saw there, that is Ilia Topuria speaking to our own Scott Fontana on our New York Post Sports YouTube channel. Go ahead and check out that interview if you haven't. But this clip from Ilia Topuria started up a little bit of a controversy with Arman Sarukian. Welcome back to Against the Cage, by the way. My name is Jake Arieh, joined by Scott Fontana and Eric Richter. And Scott, you were in this interview, so I'll throw it over to Eric. Actually, let me read what Arman said in response to this. He said, "You better pray nothing happens to Charles, because I'm the worst possible matchup for you in the division. There's a reason you're fighting the guy I had already beat and not me for that belt." So, Eric, what do you think about this whole back and forth between Ilya and Arman?
Well, first of all, I think that Scott's a little piece of the fight now, which I think is interesting because I think that Ilya is very smart here for building that fight, immediately taking the opportunity. He's like, you know what? I actually don't think it's a smart move here from Arman Tarzukian to be the backup fighter. And you know, Arman's had issues making weight, and I think it's very smart by Ilya. Obviously, 16-0. We've never seen him really not too tested. We've seen him tested a little bit, but nothing crazy. And I think it's just really intelligence, good intelligence here by Taporia. He's the biggest star in the UFC right now, I would say, globally. And I think that, I have questions too. Why is Arman the backup fighter here? I would be really surprised if Oliveira pulled out, especially at this point in his career in a title fight. And then Arman, who hates making 155 already, is just doing it just to do it for his show money. I got a lot of questions, and Scott, I think it's interesting that, you had this conversation with Ilya and that Ilya immediately took that opportunity and he's like, you know what, I'm going to call out Arman and I want to know, like, why is he doing this? I think it's an interesting back and forth. I think it's great for the fight and I think it's great for future fights.
I'm going to throw in real quick there that one of the key elements that I think Arman Sarukian took this fight for is the fact that he is trying to get back into the UFC's good graces here. Obviously, Dana White went kind of scorched earth almost with him in January when he fell out of the title fight against Islam Makhachev. Kind of screwed the pooch there day before the fight. He needs to do things to ingratiate himself with the UFC, unfortunately for him, in order to get back to the spot that rightfully he kind of earned through his own actions. So this would be one of those ways, I imagine. So, it's he's doing what he thinks he's got to do. I get it.
Yeah. Now, if both men do make weight and there are no complications and both step into the octagon on Saturday night for UFC 317, you've got Ilia Topuria taking on Charles Oliveira. Ilia returning to lightweight. He'd fought there once before, but there still are some questions because he's consistently been at 45. Eric, I'll throw it to you. How do you think that Topuria's attributes will translate to 155?
Well, that's where it really gets interesting, right? That's a story of UFC 317 this weekend Topuria has been he fought, a higher weight class, fought higher than 145 against Jai Herbert. And I would say that was kind of a listless performance. I mean, he did win by knockout. But I would say that, Jai Herbert, not a world beater, right? I think at this point he'd be, a minus 1,000 favorite higher. He's minus 425 right now on DraftKings against Charles Oliveira. So Jai Herbert, far from a world beater, maybe 50-50 fighter in terms of win-loss record. And, that was the only, shot that we saw of him at this weight class. And, he got knocked down. The power that was coming back, he obviously wasn't able to take as well as maybe he was at 145. So I got a bunch of questions about how he'll translate at lightweight. I don't think he should be a minus 425 favorite this weekend. It's very difficult to bet on him. And the whole story of this card is can Ilya go up to 155? He was so dominant at featherweight. It was so impressive, the way that he was knocking out these legends. He was, basically he was like legend killer, Randy Orton legend killer. You take that nickname, Ilya. Thank me later. I just thought it was unbelievable what he was doing at featherweight. I wish that he was able to stay at that weight. He says he weighs 179 walking around. I'm interested to know if that's even true. I'd love for him to, fight in California and see what his, weight is, because they test your weight before you step into the octagon, just to see what it is. So I'm interested to know. And at 155, this is going to be fascinating. Oliveira is always going forward, right? Like, he is heavy on the front foot and he's always pushing pace. So we're gonna find out everything we need to know about both fighters to see where they're at this point.
I wanna push back at you a little bit, Eric, on the whole thing with the Jai Herbert fight, right? I'm not saying that Jai Herbert was a better fighter than what you're saying. I think you assessed him correctly, but couple things I'd like to contextualize there. That fight was 3 years ago. He was 25 years old. There's a big difference between 25 and 28 in terms of physical development, in terms of his development as a fighter. I think he's grown a lot. That fight in particular, though, yes, he was in big trouble in that first round. He is a notorious slow starter, I think, Ilia Topuria. We've seen him start smoother, but typically he gets a little bit better after that first round. I think he likes to feel things out a little bit, and he got caught, right? He overcame a giant edge in height and in reach. I mean, we're talking about 6 inches in height, 8 inches in reach. There's very few animals like that at 155 pounds. Charles Oliveira is only 3 inches taller. He's only 5 inches more in the reach. Obviously, these are not small numbers, but they're a little more closer to what he experienced against someone, say, Max Holloway's size, right? I think we've really got to understand here that this is somebody who is now no longer sucking out tons of water from his body. I think he's going to be more fresh. I think the power is going to translate. That is my theory. Anyway, we'll see. It certainly looked good when he knocked out Jai Herbert. He survived really well in that fight, and then he finished him in a way that Jai Herbert could not, who is a decent striker. He's got some power there. I really do think there is a good chance that as long as he can withstand the takedowns at this new weight class, he's going to thrive.
Yeah, and now this lightweight that he will be facing, Charles Dubronx Oliveira, a staple at lightweight for a few years now, also a former 145er. This is a bit of an interesting situation. We've been talking about Arman Tsarukyan a little bit in this podcast episode already. Is Oliveira the best choice to oppose Topuria for this title? Scott, I'll throw it back to you for this one. What do you think?
No, it should be Tsarukyan. I understand all of the toes that he stepped on without meaning to. It's not like he was going out of his way to try and ruin a fight. Things happened that unfortunately were probably within his control and didn't control as well. Back injury, maybe should have pulled out earlier. Could have been a weight cut. Maybe, who knows? It really, on merit, it should be him. And frankly, in terms of box office, Eric's favorite thing, I think the box office lies with Arman Tsarukyan much more than it lies with Charles Oliveira. So I would rather have seen that happen. All the unfortunate stuff in January be damned. But I will say this: if it wasn't Oliveira, I'd almost be okay with it being Justin Gaethje instead, because Justin Gaethje, it's a little bit more. I think hype once again, but also it removes that whole Arman Tsarukyan situation from the mix. Now we've got kind of something that's not complicated. So I would have been okay with that. But having said all that, Charles Oliveira is incredible. He's an incredibly accomplished fighter. I don't really have a true problem with it, but there's a better choice.
How about you, Eric? What are your thoughts?
It should be Arman Tsarukyan, as you say. Scott, my issue with Oliveira at this point, I mean, he's 2-2 in his last four. The lightweight's kind of like a bit of an older division. Obviously, Justin Gaethje's, he's pulling for that title fight. He's been very vocal about it. He has, 2 wins over Rafael Fiziev here, but outside of that, I'd like to see him maybe win another fight in order to get the title shot. My issue, I don't really have a huge issue with Oliveira fighting here. My issue is more with Topuria even being at 155 to begin with. If he really wanted to move up, it should have been the Islam Topuria fight. And I'm not trying to rehash old stuff. And I know that we've talked about this a lot. Islam Makhachev should be fighting Ilia Topuria, and then Arman should be backing up that fight. Honestly, that I do feel like 155 was kind of robbed of that. I don't know how the UFC could have avoided it. They probably couldn't. For Ilia, this is not exactly what should be happening at 155. I think he should be fighting at 145, and Islam should be fighting at 155. But here we are, and that's kind of the state of 155 right now.
I felt that way too, Eric. I really feel that way about him kind of staying at 45, doing more work there. But look, if the guy's saying like, I just can't do this cut anymore, what can you do? I mean, I'm especially a very big proponent of fighters not sucking themselves dry. I'd rather you fight at a much more comfortable and safer weight class where you can perform better and healthier and longer without, hopefully destroying your kidneys and all your renal functions and that kind of thing. We don't want that. I'm a big proponent of that. So I can't sit there and say he should have stayed while I feel that way. But I'm with you. It would have been much better if it was Islam Makhachev. Islam left. It wasn't Ilya's choice. He even told me he wanted to fight Islam, and it's less of a prize now, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and when with him moving up in weight, I feel like he's gonna he's just gonna have harder time with matchups. Like there's gonna be some matchups where it's just gonna be like he's gonna be out. Like if Joel Alvarez wins like another fight or two, he's gonna be right up there for a title shot, and he's way bigger than Ilia Topuria. So I have issues where it's like he's gonna be undersized in some of these matchups. Even like Beneil Dariush, he's gonna be undersized in that fight. I'm not saying that Beneil Dariush is close to a title shot, but he's going to be undersized in a lot of matchups here. So that's my only issue. 5'7", 155 is not an ideal size for, even though he's thick 155. 5'7" with, I believe 68-inch reach. Like that's just, typically that's not going to do it.
And that's an interesting point, and something that you alluded to earlier is him having these claims about his weight. But one thing that we do know is that he against Max Holloway, a taller, lengthier guy who now is also a 155er, he was able to close that distance and make it happen. So who knows, him and also his counterpart, former opponent Volkanovski, those two guys are good at closing the distance. Sometimes these shorter guys can make it happen. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. One thing that I am curious about though is the physicality from him moving up to 155. Charles Oliveira is also pretty big 155er, so if it does go to the ground, I'm very curious to see how that plays into it.
I would actually suspect Oliveira would be pulling guard. I don't think that he's going to try to wrestle with Topuria. I think Topuria, if he wants to be the offensive wrestler, I think that he's probably the more technical wrestler, while, Charles Oliveira is going to be going for cage push, trying to get him up against cage, expose his back, kind of like how he did to Dustin Poirier, where he pulled guard against Dustin Poirier with a grab of the glove, if you remember. It was more of like a guard pull, and then obviously he got him up against the cage, took his back, got the choke. So that, I think, would be the most likely chance at success of grappling for Oliveira, while I think that, he might even try to bait him into an offensive grappling situation where Topuria goes for a takedown and then Oliveira pulls guard.
That's an interesting scenario, Eric, but I think it's risky for Charles. I'm curious how that would play out.
You wouldn't, yeah. I would expect that he'd take guard. He'd willing to play guard.
Sure, but again, comes with risks.
Yeah, for sure.
There's like the running joke that like Oliveira is at his most dangerous when he gets dropped just because of his guard, But the thing is Topuria, if it does translate to 55, which again, like your speculation that it could, Scott, we'll see if he's able to, do anything from there. So who knows?
And not for nothing, Charles Oliveira is getting older now, longer in the tooth. He has had a ton of miles on his body. He has, I would be curious when it starts to catch up. We haven't seen it yet, but Ilya's got the power to test it.
Oh, yeah. 36 years old, 34 fights in the UFC. I mean, he didn't like getting hit younger in his when he was younger in his career, top to strikes against Paul Felder. Right. I'm not saying that, he's the same fighter or anything. He's definitely gotten better. But usually you don't want to fight the most powerful puncher that you've ever fought against at the back end of your career. Right. That's usually how it goes.
Yeah. So a lot of things to see with this fight on Saturday night. I think it's time we get into our sports entertainment rating, which if you don't know how that works, go back a few episodes, a few title fights back, and we explain how that works. So I guess I will go first. From a sporting aspect, I am going to give this a 3. No, I'll give it a 4. I'll give it a 4.
Out of 5.
Out of 5. Yes, just so we're clear. I'm going to give it a 4. Don't need to say too much in the fact that there are 1 or 2 people that I would rather be fighting in this lightweight title fight. So I'll just leave it at that. And as far as an entertainment, I'll give this one a 4. Ilia Topuria, he's box office. Eric loves box office. And Charles Oliveira is Charles Oliveira. Like, these guys get finishes. I feel like this fight could end in a finish, and they're 2 stars. I'll leave it at that. Who wants to go next?
I think Eric should go next.
I'll go to, so sporting, I'm going to go with a 4. I think it's super. Sorry, Sporty, yes. So Sporty, I'm going to go with a 4. I think it's super entertaining. My only issue is that Topuria is like such a big favorite. If it was Arman, it would have gone 5. And then entertainment, I'm going 5. Obviously on box office, Topuria is the biggest star in the UFC. Oliveira is a huge star. It's my first 5 that I've given out for any fight so far. So 5 on the entertainment
Wow.
rating. Okay.
Alrighty, I like that. Interesting. That's Eric. I like that. I'm going with a 4 from the sporting aspect because at least we do have a champion of a division coming up here. I think that that's somebody that lends a lot of credence there. Is he going against the guy that I would prefer? No, but it's someone who certainly makes a lot of sense in the wake of Islam Makhachev leaving the division. So I think 4 is fine. Entertainment wise, I'm also sticking with a 4. I think that there is certainly some hype here with regard to Ilia Topuria, but there's also the entertainment factor of the fight itself, which will be entertaining. I think it's very hard for this one to just go down as kind of a boring fight. Can't see it. So I'm gonna go with a 4. That gives my overall rating an 8
Same
on
for
this
me.
fight. You've got an 8. We've got a 9 from Eric. So our average is 8.333. We've got a nice solid rating for this fight.
Yeah, I think that number is that's the correct number. I think it's yeah.
Yeah.
So moving on to our co-main event, we have Alexandre Pantoja, the king of flyweight, taking on Kai Kara France. These two guys, Scott, you did an interview with Alexandre Pantoja. You mentioned in this that the two of them were on the same season of The Ultimate Fighter 9 years ago. Is that correct? Now,
That's right.
these two staples of the division. Alexandre Pantoja's fought other guys, from this sort of old guard at flyweight. Brandon Moreno, as well as a few other guys. He's beaten pretty much everyone, cleared out this old guard, Kai Kara France he's facing again. Is this the last chance, Scott, for the old guard at 125 to get one back at Pantoja, so to speak?
Yeah, I think this is the last stand here. We're once he gets through, assuming he can get through Kai Kara France, no easy task here. I think pretty much what we're staring at here is kind of a new wave of flyweight, a little bit of it on the horizon here. Yes, there's still Brandon Royval around, who's almost in that new wave, but he's also lost twice to Alexandre Pantoja. But really on the horizon, I'm interested to see what happens when guys like Amir Albazi, Tatsuro Taira, Joshua Van, who's fighting on this card, Tahir Ulanbekov. These are some of the names. Even if they somehow get back Muhammad Mokaev, I think that there is a lot of new blood on the horizon that will be very fascinating for the for the flyweight division. But yes, this is definitely that last chance. Otherwise, I think probably we're moving on from kind of those older names and starting to move into a new wave.
How about you, Eric?
Yeah, Pantoja is interesting because he came in, he was such a big prospect. That Ultimate Fighter season is really good, by the way. If anyone's ever interested in going back and watching an old one, that's a really fun one. Pantoja,
Second
Kai
that.
Kara France, Brandon Moreno, fun one. A lot of really, really good future contenders. All of them fought for a title. Brandon Moreno and Pantoja were, longtime title holders. Pantoja's an interesting fighter. He's 35 years old. He's getting a little bit older. Big favorite in this fight. Minus 275, almost minus 300 in some spots. So I'm kind of surprised by that. And the way that I've always looked at at flyweight and flyweight, not to my own horn, but flyweight's one of my most profitable divisions, and I do look at it as like I don't really know some divisions I just don't do well in. Flyweight has been very very successful for me long term, and I always look to kind of go with the underdogs all the time actually, and like even like. I look at it like a very high variance division, and that's just always like my perspective on it. Like even Steve Ursig when he fought Alexander Pantoja, I mean, Steve Ursig arguably, like if he doesn't, make a mistake in round 5, wins that fight. But then you look at, Ursig right after that, he's lost 3 in a row. So anything can kind of happen at this division, and we've seen like even like Askar Askarov fought Kai Kara France, and Kai Kara France won that, but Pantoja, that's his last loss. So if you were to do like the MMA math, it's like, oh, there's probably some value on Kai Kara France. For me, like they've fought before. I think that Pantoja is obviously going to be really, really difficult when it comes to grappling. If this is a grappling exchange at any point, I would suspect that Kai Kara France, if he gets taken down, is going to get submitted. He's lost 4 of 9 fights, Kai Kara France. So, and a lot of them are close. 2 of them against Brandon Moreno, 1 for the title. But when you look at it, Kai Kara France is, he's a striker first, and if it's a striking matchup, if he's able to stop takedowns, defends takedowns at an 88% rate. If Kai Kara France is able to stop the takedowns, he should win the striking. And I think that he's an interesting, play, especially at, by decision, you get on plus 500. I think that's a little bit better than the plus 220 money line. I think that most of his win condition is outstriking Pantoja to a decision win. So it's gonna be a fascinating fight. It's a really good co-main event.
Wow. What do you, a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
Anything
sorry,
off of
I
that,
got
Scott? No, no, no. Anything to go
No,
off
no, no.
that?
I think Eric summed up his points pretty well.
Brilliant.
The
Okay.
only thing I would say is that the Kara France's title opportunity was an interim title
Yes,
opportunity
yes,
prior
that's
to
an
this.
important.
This one is his first undisputed title opportunity.
Yeah, important clarification. I love that. Thank you for that, Eric. That was very in depth. So I guess it's time for us to go on to our second sport entertainment rating of the day. For this one, from a sporting standpoint, I'm going to give this one a 4, just because I don't think that this is the number one guy. I think if Muhammad Makayev was signed to the UFC, which I think he should be, I don't think he should have ever been dropped. That would be a 5 for me. It just feels like, because there have been, like you talking about the MMA math earlier, Eric, like Kai's been beat by some of these guys, and maybe that just speaks to the volatility of the division, but I think that it's not like a true 1 and 2. And then from the entertainment standpoint, I'll give this one, I think I'm going to give this one a 3. I don't know why, but just in my gut, I'm not like itching to see this one from the same way that I would for like another super fight, So just my gut feeling on that one. Scott, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, you know what? I think you summed up pretty well. This is a 4. And I don't know if it's necessarily Mokaev, who I would say is like makes this a 5 from my perspective, but we're at the point, because Pantoja has been so successful, that the best guys in the division are guys he's already beaten several other times. So they had to go a little lower on the list. We're not talking about 1 versus 2. And because of that, I'm going to ding this a little bit down to a 4. Entertainment wise, I think a 3 is also a nice number. I'm with you. And I think part of that is just because, as much as this could end up being fight of the night, I think it's going to end up being more like a solid fight that's not necessarily spectacular from an entertainment in the cage perspective. I don't see it as like one of the favorites for fight of the night, which is kind of rare at flyweight, but there's other flyweight fights on this card too. So,
how about you, Eric?
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna go 3 entertainment as well. I'm at a 3 on sporting as well, and my only issue with giving it a 3 though is because what would be a 4 or 5? There's not a whole lot of interesting fights at flyweight besides the lower guys on the rankings. So it's like Van, I believe, is like, I think he's in the teens, or he's definitely double digits on the rankings. Like he's gonna take a while.
UFC's got him at, I think, 11 or 12 now. Yeah.
Yeah. So like when you look at it from that perspective, it's like what gets him to a 4 or a 5, and it's like, there's not a whole lot else there in the rankings. I can get him to a 4 or 5. I'm still going to give it a 3 for sporting, just because, I feel like we've seen the fight, and yeah, that's just what I'm going with it. Going 3 and 3, 6.
Okay.
So this one dings a little bit lower. This is down to a 6.7. We're talking about, so not the highest of ratings, right? Because you had a 6, Eric, and Jake and I had 7, so that would be a 6.7.
My only issue is like, I don't know what anyone, like, the UFC couldn't do better. I don't see like there's no like obvious areas of improvement is my issue with giving it such a low rating.
But it is what it is, right?
Yeah, it is what it is.
It's not the worst of fights. It's just, maybe it's not the most hyped of fights. That's fair.
Yeah. I think that number works. So now that we've gone through the co-main event and the main event, there's also a bunch of other fights to choose from that people might want to watch. So Eric, let's start with you. What is your fight to watch?
Fight to watch is the one that everyone needs to watch and that no one can miss. Jacoby Smith is fighting Nico, and they call him Kobe Smith, by the way. Kobe Smith is fighting Nico Price. He is the biggest favorite in UFC history this weekend. I will say it again. Kobe Smith is the biggest favorite in UFC history this weekend. Previously, it was Ronda Rousey versus Betch Correa, but he's the biggest favorite in UFC history, and he's minus 3,000, and Nico Price is plus 1,000. Jacoby Smith is looking like a world beater at previous promotions. Conor McGregor, like he's looking like a superstar, and if they can promote him correctly, and there's no excuse not to be able to promote this guy. He's got the name, he's got the style, he is a bona fide finisher. He's on the early prelims, by the way. This is his UFC debut, and you have to watch it. You don't have a choice. If you're watching this podcast and you're not watching this fight, then don't talk to me.
Okay, fair enough. I'll be watching. Scott, how about you?
I mean, if we're gonna do a show next week, I guess I probably have to watch. But
Yeah.
but I think probably Eric would have taken this too if I hadn't stolen it in our planning phase here. Brandon Royval, Joshua Van. This is such an important flyweight fight. We have the chance for Brandon Royval to potentially make his case that he needs a third shot against Alexandre Pantoja. I don't know that it's going to necessarily happen unless he does something spectacular, but that can happen. The other side is Joshua Van, who's just been skyrocketing up the ranks this year. He already fought earlier this month in Jersey. We saw him win a nice fight there. I am very curious to see if Joshua Van can break through against someone who is obviously very fantastically exciting in Brandon Royval. So this is certainly a fight not to miss. But if you're already watching the pay-per-view, you won't miss it anyway.
Alrighty, thank you for that, Scott and Eric. And Eric, it's time to throw it back to you for your 3 bets in 3 minutes. You ready?
Let's do it.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Let's talk about UFC this past weekend. Before we get into our 3 bets in 3 minutes, we went 1 and 2, which isn't great, but we did hit Rafael Fiziev by decision at plus 290, so it ended up being a profitable weekend of fights, 0.9 units of profit, which is, it's good. It's not great, but hopefully we're gonna start a new leaf here. We're gonna turn a new leaf rather, and let's go over here and go over into 3 bets in 3 minutes. And we will start on the PFL for the first time. And you know what? My boy here, Sergio Pettis, always was a fan of him back in the UFC. He's fighting Rufian Stotts. And Stotts, look, he's 21 and 2. He's, rightfully a big time favorite against just about every opponent. He's only lost to a guy named Patchy Mix and another guy named Merab Dvalishvili. Those are the only 2 guys he's ever lost to. So I'm actually I'm going to fade him here. I actually think that Sergio Pettis his striking he should have the advantage on the striking as far as I'm concerned. I think Sergio Pettis has got more volume and his takedown defense is really solid. Stotts definitely have to wrestle early and often. There's no doubt about that. And his transitions are good, but I think that Sergio's takedown defense is really solid. So for me, I'm going to take Sergio Pettis here plus 215 on the money line over at Caesars. And there's some offshore books we can get it even a little bit higher. So for me, I think Pettis here gets it done. Maybe by decision here, but give me Pettis on the money line in this fight. And we're going to head right back to the UFC and go to UFC 317, where Ilia Topuria is fighting Charles do Bronx Oliveira. Now, I originally had said, and I think I've talked about today, I don't like the money line price. I think that there's no way that Topuria should be favored here by minus 500 in some spots. And while I do agree that there is value on Charles, my issue is that I feel like that the method of victory props are a little bit mispriced. I think that Topuria's method of victory here is definitely by knockout. I don't really see I don't see a decision going his way that consistently that I would not have a minus 450. I think his KO rate is fairer value for his KO rate is probably in the minus 200 range. I'm looking here at minus 150. I'm getting value. And I think that if it did somehow get to a decision, there's probably some grappling involved. There's probably some cage push. And, Topuria, we saw him get tired against Max Holloway. I'm not saying that he, would lose a decision, but I'd say that, I think Charles Oliveira is a big guy. This is a new division, a new weight class for him. So, I'm going to go with Topuria here by knockout, minus 150. And I think we're going to be saying and new, and he's going to be for the second time a champion here in the UFC as a 16-0 fighter. So, and then we're going to go to the prelim fight, and this is a fighter that I wish I could maybe coach him a little bit. Terrence McKinney has come out into the UFC, to a fault. He has just run at his opponents in ways that are. It's not ideal in some cases. He definitely in his UFC debut, knockout inside of a minute, and everyone's gonna say he's gonna be a superstar. He's 16-7 at this point, though. He's lost a bunch of fights by knockout, by submission. He is a good grappler. I would wish that he would go for more submissions and stop getting into these firefights in the striking, and that's kind of what he's gonna have here against Vlad. And Vlad, for where he is in his career, he's a very solid striker. And I think that McKinney will sit here and try to grapple at least a little bit. And whether Vlad is able to, stop the grappling, I'm not even too worried about the winner here because McKinney's only a minus 150 favorite. I'm not even worried about the winner here. I just think, look, Borshev, he's not a finisher by any stretch of the imagination. His last 2 fights have gone to decision, 3 of his last 4, and I think that McKinney should look to grapple here. Vlad does not defend takedowns at a particularly high rate. It's only 43% takedown defense, so I'm not asking for a lot. I'm just asking for a little bit of strategy and a little bit of grappling. So Terrence McKinney, give me a takedown, and let's see if we can grind this one out. I'm going to have the fight to start round 1 at plus 104 on FanDuel, and give me goes the distance plus 500. 8 of these 12 fights are projected to end inside the distance. There's no way. I mean, it's possible, so I won't say there's no way, but I will say that I could see a roadmap here for a couple more decisions to happen, and I think plus 500 is just a great spot. So plus 500 by decision, and fight just starts round 2. Spread out your money there, but let's get some wins here. And those are your 3 bets in 3 minutes. Enjoy the fights. Let's make some money.
So thank you so much for that, Eric. And to finish out this card, Scott, give us your event rating for UFC 317. How are we looking?
We got a solid 87 here. 2 quality
Oh.
title fights. As you know, maybe they're not the greatest title fights of all time. To some degree, yes or no. But there's plenty of top 25 talent on this one. Not super deep in the latter half of the card in terms of ranked fighters. And we also have someone who is well outside of the top 100 in Peyton Talbot, also a part of the pay-per-view portion of the card. That takes it probably out of that 90th percentile range, unfortunately, because it is what it is. But it's still a very terrific card. It's typical of the UFC to put together a really solid to strong pay-per-view portion that sometimes is at the expense of fight nights, but less so lately too. So that's been nice.
Yeah, I think that's a very solid score, especially like you mentioned with Peyton Talbot kind of bringing it down a little bit. But as we've said before, that's not how the scaling works. So
he also has a good opportunity to jump up like very high up the rankings with a win here. So that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, we'll see if he could bounce back. So that wraps up UFC 317. Also, because it is International Fight Week, historically and going forward, Hall of Fame inductions are in order over the past year since the last inductions. I'll briefly read them out in front of you guys. The inductees are Amanda Nunes for the Modern Wing, Robbie Lawler, Modern, Vitor Belfort, Pioneer, Mark Kerr, Pioneer, and for the fight, Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum, UFC 236, and Craig Pelagian also in the contributor wing who helped create the Ultimate Fighter. Scott, I'll start with you. Do any of these guys stand out to you, and do you have any memories of that person?
Guys and gals, but
And
I am
gals.
picking a guy here in this case. I am picking Robbie Lawler, and the reason is just he made such an impressive second act of his UFC career, we'll say, because he was with the UFC. It didn't quite go exactly the way it hoped when he was a prospect. He ended up leaving, fighting on some of the more independent circuits, and ended up in Strikeforce, where he kind of lost his way. He was like this inconsistent middleweight fighter. Sometimes fun to watch, sometimes he'd get taken down and just you knew he was out of his depth. And then he goes back down to welterweight after Strikeforce is finally absorbed by the UFC after its purchase, and to defying all odds becomes this like legendary fighting welterweight champion that I don't think anyone really saw coming. I think a lot of people had written him off. So the fact that he was able to take control of his career once again in his 30s in the second half of his career, really impressive. We're not talking about him otherwise. So good for the ruthless one in that respect.
Eric, how about you?
Amanda Nunes, when she fought Chris Cyborg and was a plus 250 underdog, Cyborg was like the scariest girl on the planet, and she just mollywopped her within a minute. I believe that it was a standing knockout, had to be stopped by Herb Dean. That was an unbelievable moment. Unbelievable. The crowd was going wild. That was the co-main event of that card. I believe John Jones fought on that card as well as the main event. I could be wrong on that, but regardless, she was the co-main event on that card. It was an unbelievable card, and that's that's probably my favorite moment in MMA history, honestly. That was obviously the biggest fight, so I'm not like breaking news here, but that was a fun one.
For me,
Jake, you're a newer fan. What do you got?
yeah, I was gonna say for me, Izzy versus Kelvin Gastelum holds a special place in my heart. It was I want to say it might be the first like actual full main card that I sat down and watched, and kind of the history of this one was I was with one of my college friends on my floor, and we were watching Izzy versus Anderson Silva, and during that fight he turns to me and he says, "This guy Izzy is going to be the next big thing of the UFC. Crazy prediction. He wins that fight. A few months later, this fight is on, and he's fighting Kelvin, and like the whole fight's we know how it went, right? Izzy pulls out that 5th round and wins the fight, and it was just absolutely insane. I was like, all right, I'm in. So for me, that was one of the catalysts for me going into this MMA fandom thing. So holds a very special place in my heart.
I love it.
Yeah. So that wraps up UFC 317 International Fight Week. Last weekend, this is something we have to talk about. UFC Azerbaijan came and went, but the biggest thing did not happen during the fights. It happened in the post-fight press conference. Dana White announces that Jon Jones is retired and that Tom Aspinall is the new undisputed UFC champion of the world. Now, with Jon Jones's heavyweight reign officially over, and it would be remiss if I did not mention that there was also some other news that came out about Jon, legal situation, charges, and all that, developing situations, so maybe we'll talk about more of it as we get new information. But now that Jon Jones's heavyweight reign is officially over, at least for now, how does his 2-year heavyweight reign, what does it mean for the division? Scott, I'll start with you. What do you think?
I think it really set it back. I really do. Obviously there was some legit excitement around the time when Francis Ngannou was the champion prior to that. Even going into the title fight that Jon Jones did win the heavyweight title, there was a lot of hype there, and it very quickly died because we had to wait a whole extra year for a fight that people weren't necessarily demanding to happen, but at least made some sense for a period of time with Stipe Miocic, and then it gets delayed and he just won't fight anybody else, so they have to have an interim title, and then we get Tom Aspinall coming along, but then he's got to wait because everybody's kind of looking at him as like, yo, I think he might actually be the potentially the best heavyweight that we have actively fighting. Everything's just stalled now. So I think we kind of almost had like a 2-year period of practically lost heavyweight action, and it's disappointing.
Eric, how about you?
Disaster. The last, I would even go back as far as like the last 4 years, and even call back to when Jon was bulking up to get to heavyweight and fight Francis Ngannou. Is just such a disappointment. I mean, if you go back even further, Daniel Cormier calls out Brock Lesnar, really fun call out. Post fight, Brock Lesnar shoves Joe Rogan, and like that was really fun, and then that fight falls through. And then you go back and it's like Francis Ngannou, he's the champ, he's the guy. I don't know who's to blame for it. Someone needs to take responsibility. Nobody will. But Ngannou doesn't fight Jon Jones. Dana originally says that why would Jon want to fight Ngannou? You see what Ngannou did tonight?
Yeah.
And then after, like, Jon Jones never ducks a fight with anybody. Francis Ngannou's difficult to work with. And then he goes off to the PFL. So I would call back to like the last, I would even go back to the last 5 years and just say this was a total mismanaged disaster by all parties involved. Ngannou should never have left. Jon should have been up at heavyweight sooner. The UFC should have figured out a way to make all of that come together. I mean, at the end of the day, they're a fight promotion. Their goal is to make the best fights, and they didn't fulfill their goal, fulfill their duty at all at heavyweight. Unfortunately, and the losers are the fans. Those 3 fights would have been they would have gotten Conor McGregor level pay-per-view buys, all of them.
Yeah, absolutely massive fight. And as far as Jon Jones's legacy, I feel like I don't know if anything after the Cyril Gane fight, from that moment on, I think his stock only went down. Like, I don't think he really got anything from the win over Stipe Miocic, and then everything else surrounding the Stipe fight, the beforehand and the afterward. I'm talking about the second go around, of course. I feel like it diminished his legacy. It just looked like he did not want to fight anyone except for Stipe or someone who he had a significant grappling advantage over, like Alex Pereira, perhaps. Right? I know he's training with Glover, but you
Fair.
could make the argument that that's something that Jon sought as a reason for why he wanted to fight Pereira. So.
For a fighter who made his name at 205 by defeating everybody and being very active and really just showing that, yes, he would take on all comers. He was an extremely active champion, at least up until the point when he, obviously ran into some of his out of the cage issues that really hampered his career. To that point, he was really fantastic. And it just flies in the face of it, to the point that It's unfortunately one of the more lasting memories. Is we're going to remember him as someone who very much scripted the end of his career. He wanted to be the heavyweight champion. He wanted to defend that belt. He only wanted to defeat, a legend in doing that. And when we actually had a legit, real contender, it's, he made a point that like, oh, if I just fight him and then I fight the next one, I fight the next one. Tom Aspinall was a different level of contender. And obviously he's the champion, so he's more than contender. But this was someone that I think he only had to beat him. If he beat Tom Aspinall and then decided to walk away, I don't think anybody would have given him crap. I think we would be looking at a very different legacy for John Jones as a heavyweight. Now it just looks like he tacked something on at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to just point out also that Mike Bond over at MMA Junkie called back to a previous tweet. I believe it was a few years ago, but he retweeted it with a quote and said, maybe the quote basically said that John, his everything that he like holds on to is about winning, and that if he ever didn't, is like, and he made fun of and all the fighters who lose, and he's like they're hugging their family. He's like, oh, better luck next time. He's like, if I did that, if that ever happened to me, I would lose my mind and I'd be so embarrassed and like all this stuff. He's like basically like he'd lose himself if he wasn't synonymous with winning and like he holds on to that undefeated record seemingly, according to like the old quote. And Mike made a really good point and said, I don't know, maybe it's just good that like he's gonna end undefeated based on all the issues that he's had outside the octagon. Maybe it's just good that he's gonna call it from here and just move on, because like who knows if he loses to Tom, and he was a betting underdog in the odds that were put out. If he lost to Tom, like who knows what happens.
But the other side is the what he gains from winning that one. I mean, then we're looking at somebody who truly dominated one weight class for a decade, then came up to a second weight class in the latter half of his career, and he actually got it done against the guy that everyone thought this is a lion in his prime, and it just didn't happen. He didn't want the smoke, and we'll remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, how can you get better than already being the best? And I guess there's the argument of the PEDs and all that stuff. But if you do regard him as the best, which many do, you can't top being the best. So it's like I understand where his head was at, but I think we can all agree we really would have loved to know where his head was at much sooner than UFC Azerbaijan. So
Dragging it out didn't help either. Yeah, that hurt.
I'll also point out that John Nash had tweeted that John Jones is getting a massive payout from the UFC Fighter Fund from the lawsuit. He's getting like a $6.7 million payout from wages that were lost or whatever through UFC's business.
It was all part of the lawsuit settlement. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the lawsuit settlement. Thank you. And he's getting a payout this year of $6.7 million. He also has been talking about how he's like, executive level at some whatever startup company, so he's getting money from that. For me, it just seems like it's a money thing. Like he's like, I don't need to fight anymore because I make money elsewhere.
yeah, definitely. He was asking for that FU money if it would ever make it worth his while, but I don't know. That's a whole other can.
Can't hate on that part. I get that.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
But it's a whole other can of worms to open up about.
Can't knock the hustle.
No, definitely not. So now that we've kind of talked about what it meant for his legacy and for the division, let's talk a little bit more about the heavyweight division. Does John leaving and Tom becoming the undisputed champion reinvigorate this heavyweight division? Eric, I'll start it with you because you've got this new champion who says he's going to be active, but he's kind of already fought a lot of the guys. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, when you look at the rankings alone, it's like there's not a whole lot else there. Who's Tom gonna fight now? Is it gonna be Surreal Gone? Will Alex Pereira move up to that? Would maybe reinvigorate it. But it's like when you just go down the rankings, there's not a whole lot there. I mean, we've talked about previously, like we like Chinese fighter Ming Yang Zhang, who actually just got a fight announced. Ming Yang Zhang is a potential prospect, and we like Jonathan Almeida, but there's really not a whole lot else there. I feel like Aspinall is going to be heavily favored against all of these guys. So heavyweight division just looks like a sad, sorry state right now of out of shape fighters who are hoping to get lucky with a knockout.
Scott, I see you chuckling. Do you agree?
Man, Eric, you are very negative on this one. I'm trying to go glass half full here. I mean, you can only go up from what we had. I think at the very least, you've got someone. Tom Aspinall has declared he wants to be an active champion. I understand the dearth of competitors here that he hasn't already beaten, and that is an actual problem, right? It really, truly is. But shoot, we're actually going to get real championship fights happening in this weight class against people who are actually wanting to fight. It's kind of going to be amazing, right? Like, I mean, promises are crackers, right? You'd be fat. But we're talking about a situation that I think at least there is a unicorn at the top of the division who wants to fight. And I think they'll be able to find guys to face them. I mean, we've got Taliesin, Teixeira is coming up. We've got some guys that are on the horizon. I think it's going to be okay. And at least, unfortunately, heavyweight's a little more fractured than other weight classes. We've got a lot of talent over in PFL and honestly, some other come up talent over in promotions overseas in Asia and Europe as well. It would be nice if they were all in one place and that would help. But I'm trying to be optimistic here. I like where we're going.
I'm kind of in between you guys in the sense that I do agree with Eric that, like, just looking at it from a first glance, it looks dark and kind of bleak and uninteresting. But now that this, like you said, like he plans to be an active champion, that kind of gets the gears moving at the top of the division. Even if the first fight is not necessarily what we would love to see, this kind of takes that blockade at the top of the division off, where these top 5 guys aren't like trying to fight because they're coming off of a win. So it just gets more fights announced and things moving on quicker. So
I'd like to push back on the activity thing. Aspinall said that he wants to fight in October. What's he been waiting for?
That's pretty good. He's been waiting for John Jones. What are you talking about?
Another thing to note is like they only have so many pay-per-view slots, and some of them are kind of booked up.
Yeah, they're not going to throw the heavyweight fight on top of some of the other ones they have. They're looking for an opening, and I mean, is it going to be October? No, maybe not. I mean, he might not fight in Abu Dhabi or wherever it is. Maybe they have a second pay-per-view in there since they're not having one in September. He could go back to the Garden, guys. I mean, he seems to like fighting in New York now, so you never know.
We love that. He likes New York. In our interview, said he liked it. It's still maybe a little bit busy, but compared to Manchester. So listen, I think we got to move on because there's a lot of other stuff that we do have to get to. So let us know what you guys think about Tom being the undisputed champion. Are you excited or more or less excited for the heavyweight division post John Jones? Let us know down below. But like I said before, Azerbaijan did happen. It was something, even though it kind of got overshadowed by John Jones. Khalil Roundtree Jr. Defeats Jamal Hill via decision over 5 rounds. My question to you, I'll throw it to Eric. How much did Khalil boost his standing at light heavyweight with his performance over Jamal Hill?
Massively. I was shocked, honestly. I thought he looked super technical, and I was really surprised by how well he utilized the leg kicks against Jamal Hill. Upon a rewatch, I was kind of mind blown by how good his boxing was. I always thought, I was like, Jamal Hill could be like leave the UFC and go to boxing, like do some super fights, fight on Jake Paul fight card or something like that. Especially now that he's lost a bunch in a row here. I thought his leg kicks was awesome, and I was just really surprised by Jamal Hill's it was not even like he was like timing leg kick and then like trying to box him while Khalil was doing the leg kicks. It just seemed like he didn't know what to do. I thought that there would be a little bit better defense there, considering he fought Alex Pereira, who's the leg kick king. So honestly, shout out Roundtree, totally beat me on that one, and impressed, no doubt. I would also like to point out that 10 of the 12 fights on this card went the distance, which is nuts. That's I don't know if that's a record or not, but I mean, for a guy who bets decisions a lot, I came out really profitable for the night. Just want to talk about that.
I'm not sure it's a record. It's probably close, but I don't think it is.
10 out of 12 is just crazy though. It was a long,
It's
long
good.
day.
It's impressive.
It does make it long.
Scott, what do you think about Khalil Rountree's his stock or his standing at light heavyweight?
He definitely gained some respect here. I mean, he had to have, right? I mean, this is a win over a former champion. He did not have anything like that before. I think now we start to move away from, Eric was referencing last week, the fact that he, didn't think he beat Justin Jacoby. That starts to look a lot older. We can kind of put that in the rear view when we see what he does against this level of talent now. He has shown he does belong. It was a little bit of a reach to put him in that title fight last year, but now we're not talking about the same thing if he gets back to that level. It's not just that he had a title fight, he can get another one. It's that now he's starting to beat guys up at that upper level. He might only need one more win to get a second title shot, especially provided it is not Alex Pereira here. If it is still Magomed Ankalaev when that rolls around, I think it looks very easy to say, okay, let's see how he does.
Yeah, I definitely agree. One win away sounds just about right to me. So that takes care of Azerbaijan. Something that also happened over the weekend on Friday night, PFL. We have 3 new finals after the semifinals were completed. 155, women's 125, and 135. Scott, I'll throw it to you because you've got your eye on the PFL probably more than Eric and I. What is your appetite for the 3 finals that were set on Friday? Which one do you like?
I'm just gonna highlight the one that I'm most intrigued by, and that is at lightweight, Gaji Rabadanov, against Alfie Davis. Davis is intriguing to me because he was, a little off the radar a little bit as a kickboxer. Now we're starting to see, okay, he can handle this level of competition, but this is really all about Rabadanov. He is now appointment viewing. If you are watching the PFL, he is definitely one of the ones to tune in for, like few others on the roster. I think we're looking at somebody who's in kind of that rare level of like, if he jumped over to the UFC, you would certainly see him be in the mix at the top relatively quickly. Could he lose to Alfie Davis here? Sure, but man, there's a lot of ways that Rabadanov can have some success here. I'm looking forward to that lightweight final.
Sounds good. Eric, do you have any before we move on to this Friday?
I just wanted to call out Justin Wetzel. Just it was one of like he fought last week, and I'm the name of his opponent is escaping me, but I watched the whole fight, and it was just one of the most boring fights I've ever watched. It was basically like an average grappler versus a guy with no grappling. Well, not no grappling. He was a 10th planet grappler who was just pulling guard and looking to get submissions and not ever getting close, going for guillotines the whole time. It was 15 minutes of that. It was like maybe I don't know what the striking numbers are, but they were low, and it was terrible. If the UFC, my issue with it is that the UFC would, if it happened, they would call it out. The PFL just lets it go, and I just thought it was a terrible fight, and I'm not looking forward to that 135 belt anymore.
Well, hopefully this Friday we get some more entertaining fights than your assessment of that one right over here. We've got 185, 205, and heavyweight, the semifinals for those matchups. Scott, I'm going to throw it to you again. Which out of all these matchups do you find the most intriguing?
Middleweight, which is kind of rare to say because usually middleweight is kind of one of those divisions where I'm like, geez, middleweight is kind of full of a lot of people who are not necessarily the most intriguing in terms of the fight quality that they put together. But I like the roster that we have on Bellator, former Bellator, now into PFL here. 3 of these 4 guys came over in the purchase here. So I think this is a good lasting benefit from some of the exodus they had post Bellator purchase as well. Fabian Edwards against Josh Silveira, Dalton Rasta against Aaron Jeffrey. I think both of these fights are intriguing. I think whoever comes out of this little this semifinal matchup, the tiny this portion of the tournament, this final stages of the tournament, I think that we're producing somebody who would be very intriguing to go against Johnny Eblen, even if it is Fabian Edwards a second time. I'm almost sort of want to see it. I would rather not go that way because fresh is always better. But I like what we have here. It's a nice little quartet.
I like it.
I previously lost some money on Aaron Jeffrey. He was at in the contender series against Brendan Allen and lost that fight and then never got a shot at the UFC. But he's fought Dalton Rosta before. He beat him. And Rosta is coming in here as a betting favorite. He was originally put as an underdog, and now he's a betting favorite. So Rosta is your boy, Scott. Interesting. He's getting some love from the bettors out there.
I'm curious to see how he does. Absolutely.
Now, Eric, we heard you mention PFL fight earlier in your 3 bets in 3 minutes. Why don't you take us through what you like out of these semifinals?
Yeah, well, I mean, I already talked about the Sergio Pettis one, but Alexander Romanov here, he's at one point people were talking about him being like a world beater. He's such a big hulking presence as a heavyweight for the UFC, coming in here as a betting underdog against Valentin Moldavsky. Sorry, Moldavsky. Moldavsky, yep. And he's coming in here as a betting underdog. Kind of surprised to see that. I mean, he's far from a world beater. He's lost 3 out of 5. Coming in here. And Romanov was undefeated at one point. I know he's had some conditioning issues. I'm interested to see what he looks like on the scales. I haven't, gotten a chance to look at it yet. But, Romanov, I think, is really just about him not beating himself or eating himself out of the division. I think that he's got tons of grappling advantages. And, hey, I got to bet on him as an underdog here.
Alrighty, there we go, Eric. Now, Scott, I'll throw it back to you. We have 2 events, so we got 2 event ratings. What do we have for PFL?
PFL's event rating, I think, is going to stun you guys. We're at a 33, guys.
Wow, is that the highest PFL rating we've had?
That I have on record, yes. I
There we
mean,
go.
I have to go back and kind of do all these again for me to get the full historic look here. But this is definitely a very strong card, top to bottom, frankly. The only thing that kind of drags it down is Biagio Ali Walsh having a showcase fight early on here. He is an extremely deep prospect, so that
Yes.
is kind of the nature of that. Nice kid. I've had a good conversation with him for the post before, so I don't want to diss Biagio there, but just he is what it is. He is a deep prospect. The rest of the guys on this card, we're talking about top 100 talents here, much higher, including that as well. There's not like a truly elite topper on this card, so that's kind of what keeps it in this like average to, not too bad on the road UFC fight night level, but that is still very strong for a non-UFC event. And I think really it just speaks to the fact that this is PFL really is something you got to pay attention to. They have the talent.
Alrighty, thank you so much for that, Scott. I'm going to throw it right back to you because we do have some agenda items to get to in the quick hits of MMA news. Why don't you take it away for us?
Yeah, this is heavy on fight announcements, big fight announcements in terms of headliners here. Nasruddin Imavov, he's going to go against Caio Borralho, kind of piggybacking off of last week's news of him falling out of the backup fighter there. He's going to be the headliner. They're going to be the headliners, of UFC Paris on September 6th. A week later, we've got Diego Lopez against Jean Silva, headlining Noche UFC, September 13 in San Antonio. Earlier in the summer, well, late summer, I guess we'll call it, Johnny Walker is now the headliner against Zhang Mingyang, who we heard Eric reference earlier in this show at the UFC Shanghai event on August 23rd. Co-main event of that one is also Aljamain Sterling against Brian Ortega. That's a solid one as well. It's a decent card. It's shaping up pretty well. Really shaping up.
Yeah.
Unfortunate news. We were going to update you as well on the ongoing Ben Askren situation as he has his health battle going on in the hospital right now. He has been added to the lung transplant list, according to his wife, Amy. And then one more outside of the boxer a little bit, Ronda Rousey. There is a biopic that is moving forward in Netflix. It has a director now, Augustine Frizzell, who is known for his work on HBO's Euphoria series. I never watched it. I don't know if you guys watched, but yeah,
I binged
that's the
the
news
first
this week.
2 seasons. It's pretty good.
There you go.
That I feel like we already knew that. Like once Movsar and Aaron Pico got booked, that it was like probably Yair getting the title shot against Volkanovski, but this Lopez Silva thing, it like basically confirms it. So
Just about.
yeah. So we'll see what happens with that, and then you know what? The next time something happens with the Rousey biopic, I think we could do another one of those pick your own athlete for biopic. Now that we've got Eric as well, so I think.
Oh, that's true. He didn't do
I
it
would,
last time.
I would love to do that one. Now it's time to move on to the final round. This is a term coined by our good Scott Fontana for our fight assignment and this week in MMA. So on to the final round. Let's reassess our last homework assignment. Miguel Torres versus Demetrius Johnson at UFC 130. Eric, I actually want to get your thoughts on this first because you were talking to me about it earlier that you still had to watch it. What did you think?
Yeah, I would describe it in one word. I'd say consequential. I think that the fight had lasting consequences on the future of the UFC. I think that we found out a lot. And Rogan kind of calls it out in the commentary where it really is about the grappling and how it's scored. It was really just scored with Demetrius, who was swept out of position multiple times. He, was mounted at different times. He was getting, leg locked. He was getting submission attempts. Miguel Torres looked awesome in this fight. Should have won the fight, in my opinion. I thought it was misscored. I actually had it Miguel Torres 2-1 in this fight. I'm not sure, Scott, how you're going to end up scoring it. But for me, I think it would best be categorized as consequential. I feel like every fighter and coach learned that you will not get decisions, even if you are winning the fight on the ground by staying on your back. You're not going to get the credit you deserve.
To give you context here, this goes back to a time where it's before they reclassified the criteria around 2015, 2016, 2017 time. So this would have been scored with a different mindset in mind. So let's keep that in terms of it's hard to go back and score a fight on old criteria, right? I do remember watching this fight live, and I did think that Miguel Torres did enough to win, but that was really close. The reason I picked this fight, and I am curious about Jake's thoughts as well, but the reason I picked this fight in particular is just it's like a grappler's dream in terms of MMA. I mean, this how I don't think that anyone has ever had enough fun watching just pure grappling exchanges in MMA, especially with high level MMA fighters. So that's why I picked this. Did you like that part of it, Jake?
I did. I like Eric mentioned, there was a bunch of sweeps going on, lots of submission attempts. I was, it's weird because today Mighty Mouse, I mean, I don't know how much you guys follow him, but he posts a lot of himself posting in jiu-jitsu competitions, grappling competitions. So I thought that, this guy going to the ground, I don't know too much about Miguel Torres, full disclosure, he's a little bit before my time, so I didn't understand how good of a grappler he was, but like his decision to go to the ground with Demetrius, knowing what I know about him today, I was like, why is Demetrius going to kill this guy on the ground? And Demetrius was kind of having a bit of a tough time with Miguel, so I think that, knowing this in hindsight, it's obvious that Demetrius's love for grappling probably got a lot bigger towards the later half of his career. But it was super interesting just seeing Demetrius in these defensive positions and then doing what he needed to get out of them at times and then getting put back into them. It was like, oh gosh, is Demetrius gonna lose off of his back? Like, this is kind of crazy here. So I loved it.
For full context there, Jake, I mean, when we watched this fight, this was at a point where we looked at Miguel Torres as the GOAT of 135 pounds. So we're talking about a completely established, well-regarded fighter at his own weight class, whereas Mighty Mouse Johnson was still on the come up. This was his like kind of big break fight, actually, that really took him to the next level at 135 pounds before there was a 125-pound weight class.
Okay.
So it definitely changes the way I think you would watch it if you did know that going in.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those things where it's like, gee, I don't know if Mighty Mouse is making the right call, kind of exchanging with a very offensive grappler in Miguel Torres, and we got fireworks out of it. And I think it was a really terrific fight that, yes, could have gone either way, probably, right?
Yeah, that was another point that I didn't really touch on. Super, super duper close. Like, I did not know who. I mean, well, knowing what I know now, I was like, okay, DJ probably got the win. But like, there was a piece of me that was like, maybe he lost this one. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So it was great. What's the next one? I'm curious.
Next one, and this is one that I actually has eluded me, and I'm going to give to all of us because it's brand new for me too. Don Fry against Yoshihiro Takayama, Pride 21. Let's have some fun, guys.
Yeah, alrighty. There we go. Love Pride fights. This is our second Pride fight, if I'm not mistaken. Right?
Is that right? Oh man, I got to do more Pride.
I think it was Nick Diaz was our other one, the Go-Go Plata.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was like later stage Pride because that was actually in Las Vegas. We're talking about I'm almost positive this would have been in Saitama Super Arena, which is where we think of all the Pride fights, really.
Yes, actually, you know what? I might be forgetting. We might have one more. Well, next week I'll get
Wait, yeah, we did
neither here nor there.
What was the power bomb? It was Fedor versus.
Oh yes, we did watch that one.
Yes, we did.
That was Kevin Randleman.
Yes, we watched that one.
Yes.
Okay.
That was true Pride.
You haven't been slacking on Pride, Scott. You've been fair.
All right, good.
Alrighty. So definitely looking forward to that one. All of us together watching a fight for the first time. That's very exciting. And then Scott, give us our week in MMA. What happened?
To wrap it up, we're going back to June 26th, this day that we are recording, 2011. 14 years ago on this day, Czech Congo knocked out Pat Barry in one of just the absolute wildest finishes to a fight in UFC history. I mean, the last 40 seconds or so is just insane. I watched that again today just because, and like, frankly, I've watched some of these before and I'm like, all right, I know it's coming. It's not as exciting, but this one, for whatever reason, like I like fanned out. It was so fun. And this comes from a day and age where like this was a fight night in Pittsburgh. It's just kind of like a random fight night, but you remembered these fight nights. And I feel like it's unfortunate now that everything is just like UFC of the week, and you don't get to breathe and appreciate some of the things we see, even when we see crazy stuff. I miss that, and this is harkens back to a time where that was a thing. So it's nice to look back. 14 years is a long time, though, guys. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, Mugliata's letting this go. That's such a funny commentary.
Tandem wanted heavyweights to die.
We were just talking about him, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
In the
and
Frank
frankly,
Mir one, right?
In this case, he actually gave Czech Congo the chance to come back, and it really worked out. But yeah, it literally took Pat Barry being just out cold for him to be like,
Yeah.
all right, fine, we'll stop it now because he's not moving.
Absolutely insane. Yeah, no, the end of this fight, it's like watching Game of Thrones. Like it's like, no, there's no way that Ned Stark is gonna die, and then like it just still happens. It's like it's insane. So
Yeah, you got Ned Stark. Yeah, that's good. Same year too. Game of Thrones started in 2011.
There we go. Boom. Perfect. Perfect way to tie up the show with a bow on top. Scott, Eric, thank you so much for joining me. All of you guys back home, have fun watching the fights this weekend as well as your homework assignment, and we will see you next week.
Enjoy UFC 317, everybody.